Hey there, welcome to episode 3 of the Cutting Room Floor. This is where I get to take you back to a message that I recently preached here at Sunny Slope and take you a little bit deeper, or take you to something that maybe didn't make it into the sermon because you can't get everything into one message. And so sometimes that means there's good stuff that has to just be left out. So this gives me a chance to come back to that and say a little bit more about one or two things that I think are part of the text, maybe not central to it, but are kind of in it. And it gives me a chance to share with you a little bit about that. And so I'm excited because this morning I'm going to take you to our message from Joshua chapter 4. That's what we looked at most recently, and I'll put a link to that sermon in the at the end of this little video and in the comments. In Joshua 4, the people of Israel, there's two things that happen. The first is that the people of Israel cross over the Jordan River into this promised land, this place that God had been promising to give them. And so that's the first thing. The other thing that happens is that they build these memorials. They build these stone memorials that were really meant to help future generations remember what God had done for them. Now, I want to show you two additional things this morning. The first is in John's Gospel. And in John chapter 5, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the text up on the screen. And that way you can take a look and you can kind of follow along here. This is John chapter 5. And in John chapter 5, Jesus goes to this place called Bethesda. And the pool of Bethesda was this body of water. It was probably it was a pool or a natural body of water. And the local wisdom said that every once in a while, these waters would get stirred up. And when that happened, then anyone who had any kind of physical disability could go into the water. And it's kind of like first come, first serve. The first person into the water would be healed. So Jesus meets this man. We see right here, verse 6, Jesus sees a man lying there he's been an invalid for 38 years. He's not been able to walk. And so that's obviously a challenge. If your healing depends on your ability to get up and walk into the water, well, if you don't have the ability to walk, obviously that's not going to work for you. So Jesus comes up to him and the man says, hey, Jesus says, do you want to be healed? The man says, well, I have no way of getting into the waters. So Jesus then does something really remarkable. He says, well, then just get up, take up your mat and walk. And lo and behold, this man does that. Now, fast forward a little bit, because this causes some controversy. And so we go a little, which I won't get into all that right now. You can read it. It's later on in chapter 5. But what I do want to point your attention to is a little later in the story. In chapter 5, where Jesus actually says, let me find it here a second. Here we go. Jesus is answering questions about everything that has happened. And there's some controversy because it happened on the Sabbath and lots of other stuff, which, as I said, I won't get into here. But here's what I want to point you to. And I'll highlight it here. In the same chapter 5, verse 24, Jesus actually explains his actions this way. He says, whoever hears my word and believes him who has sent me has eternal life. He doesn't come into judgment, but has passed from death to life. So what Jesus is saying is that there's now a new way to pass through the waters of judgment. No longer will you need to pass through the waters of the Jordan River. No longer will you need to pass through the waters of Bethesda. No longer will you need to pass through any other waters in order to find the healing that you long for. Jesus is saying, I am the one. It's in me that a person will pass through the waters into new life. Right? So here's this man. He's been physically disabled. He's been crippled for a very, very long time. And Jesus says, guess what? I've got a new way. You don't need to worry about the waters anymore. You don't need to worry about the water of Bethesda. You can pass through me. which is a remarkable thing. It's again coming back to this idea that your moving from death to life does not depend on you, what you are able to do, what you are capable of doing. It simply is looking to Jesus and finding in him the means by which we pass through from death to life, because he's passed through the waters for us. He's gone through the waters of baptism, through the waters of judgment, and he has come up into new life so that in him we pass from death into life. Okay, that's the first thing. Guess what? I've got more though. Let me take you to another theme that came out in the text. And in, let me just go to it here. The other theme that came out in this text was the theme of the stones. And stones, I said in the Bible, in the message on Sunday, stones are God's way of helping us to remember significant events in what he has done for us. And so the Israelites build this little pile of stones. It was not the first time that they did that, of course. There are other times and other occasions when major characters in the Bible build these stones. One of them was Abraham. Now, this is where it gets a little bit, Abraham builds a number of altars. And these altars presumably were made out of stone, although it's possible they were not. And so we have to be a little careful here about stretching this too much. But we do know that Abraham was promised this land. He was the first one to hear the promise of God, of God's promise to give land. And when Abraham hears that, there are a number of times where he builds these altars, but he never entered the land. So Abraham is always getting close to the land. He's always looking forward to the land, but he's never receiving it. And when he's anticipating it and looking forward to it, he's building these altars. He's building these stone monuments as a way of worshiping God and remembering God's promises. Well, the Israelites, when they cross into the land, what's the first thing they do? They build an altar. They build maybe not an altar, but they build a stone memorial as a way of saying, okay, Abraham has anticipated this. We are now receiving it. And in order to commemorate that, we build the altar or the stone memorial. Now, one of the things I said in the message was that the stone memorial was, not one of the things I said. It's one of the things the text tells us is that the stone memorials were built with 12 stones, one representing each tribe, right? Each tribe of Israel had a stone attached to it. And that was their way of commemorating, this is the land that God has given us. Now, I want to show you this. This is really neat in the New Testament, because in the New Testament, by the time you fast forward all the way into the book of Revelation, you get this description, and I'll highlight it here. You get this description of the city, the new city that we are, that God is promising to his people. And guess what? The city that God is promising is a city that is built on a foundation of stones. You can read it here, Revelation. It's Revelation chapter 21, verse 4, and you read about the walls. But here's what I want to draw your attention to. It's the foundations of the wall of the city, and they're adorned with every kind of jewel: jasper, sapphire, agate, emerald, onyx, carnelian, chrysolite, beryl, topaz, chrysoprase, jacinth, and amethyst. Those are precious stones. They're these beautiful, refined, perfected stones, and they make up the foundation of the home that God is preparing for his people. So we move from these stones, which are very ordinary, sort of dull, boring stones. In the Old Testament, one represented for each of the 12 tribes, into the New Testament. And in the New Testament, as we look ahead to this promised land that awaits, guess what? 12 stones again, but not dull stones, not unpolished, but perfected, beautiful stones that make up the foundation of this city that God is preparing for his people. Friends, that's what you and I wait for. That's the land that is promised to us. That's the land that we anticipate and hope for. And it's the land that, by God's grace, one day we will receive. It's a far greater land than anyone could have anticipated and anyone could have experienced in this world. But it's the land that we all wait for. And one day, by God's grace, we will all arrive there. All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. I'll put a link to the message in this video, and if you would, take a moment and subscribe to our channel and come visit us at Sunny Slope Church. Thank you, and God bless.